Now let's just close our eyes and just breathe naturally, and let's go into this time of just visualization and this time of feeling, allowing yourself to visualize the world in your life as you wish to see it, and allowing yourself to feel the feeling of that happening all around you as we go into our time of meditation today. As you begin to bring your awareness back to this present time and present space, I invite you to hold this visualization and hold this feeling. Seeing the world, visualizing the world, and holding the world and your life as it is you wish to see. For possibilities are always endless. And this strength and this power that you are. Just allowing it to infuse every cell of your body. Knowing that it is the truth. And so it is, and so we allow it to be. Namaste. Having to do a lot of things on video and virtually, it's really brought out some creativity. Did you have fun doing that, Pete? He said he had a lot of fun. Yeah. So I'm starting to wonder if we'll even get Pete to be able to do special music for us in person again, but who knows? Thanks, Pete. All right, so I wanted to shift gears for just a second before I go into the talk. Many of you likely are already aware, but not everyone probably is. One of our beloved congregants, Ken Addering, his body was diagnosed with more of an aggressive form of cancer this past week. He will be entering hospice at the beginning or sometime next week. Ken and Sally ask that you please hold them in prayer. Another thing, they are accepting visitors at their home, but please call first before you go. That's a request of theirs to ask of everyone. It's okay if you visit, but just please call first before you show up. And please, let's continue and hold Ken and Sally in our prayers as they navigate this next journey of their lives. So please hold them in prayer. Ken and Sally, we love you, and we hold you in prayer here today as well. Okay, so this week we start delving into week 2 of our book study. And, I want to talk about, love yourself seriously. And we'll talk about that. I hope everybody's had some really good discussions in their groups last week, or at least some really good food for thought, if you've decided to study on your own, rather than in a small group. And this week's topics are on self-love and resilience, and on getting in touch with that warrior that resides within you, and moving through life through the eyes of that and actions of that warrior. Now, chapter 4 gets right to it by starting with a quote, and this quote is from author, poet, and Buddhist priest Zenju Earthlyn Manuel, where she says, "Awakening from the distortion of oppression begins with tenderness. We recognize our own wounded tenderness, which develops into the tenderness of vulnerability and culminates in the tenderness that comes with heartfelt and authentic liberation." So our author, Mr. Ralph De La Rosa, he brings this quote into a chapter that's dedicated to self-love and what it is that perhaps we're missing when it comes to self-love. Because it's not so easy for me to stand here and just say, love yourself, seriously. It's not always easy to just take that and be like, well, all right, Evin, why didn't you tell me so? But it first kind of depends on who it is that's defining self-love, right? And Mr. De La Rosa gives examples of answers that we might get back. Say we decide, hey, I'm going to log on to Google, and I'm just going to put in there, what's the definition of self-love? And he gives a few in his book that I wanted to read and share. If you find a therapy blog, it might say, well, self-love is knowing your worth and not settling for less than you deserve. If you find a self-help blog, it may say, well, self-love is embracing the past, present, and future. But on the other hand, if you find a blog that's more, catered to style or something like that, it may say, Well, self-love means you wake up in the morning with an enthusiastic and positive attitude. So it really depends on who's defining it, right? But in those definitions, which one is right? Are there any of them that are wrong or right? And if so, which one are ones? Well, I do want to say this a little bit about the style blog definition. While waking up each morning with an enthusiastic and positive attitude is, indeed good advice, and something that we'd all like to do each and every day, it doesn't always come right away. At least without a little bit of work and a little bit of practice to help get us to that point. And it doesn't even likely come to each and every day, even when we are doing the work. It might also be kind of difficult, at least for someone who is maybe experiencing true pain in their life. And although it might seem great to tell somebody, hey, Pete, or such and such, you just need to wake up with a positive attitude. It's not always so easy to do. So let's spend a little bit of time today digging a little bit deeper into that. For me, I'm going to admit something here that Pete's probably going to give me a hard time over, and something that I'll feel a little bit embarrassed about later. But I thought of a song when I was getting ready Pete's doing this, but wait till you hear what song it is. It's when I was getting ready to write this talk and read the chapter, and it kept coming to my mind. And it was a song by Whitney Houston. And it's called The Greatest Love of All. Does anybody remember that one? You probably do. Yeah, Pete's got his hands all out. Pete's singing it. I should have had him sing it to everybody. But she sings, and I'm not going to sing it here, I'm just going to say it. But she says, because the greatest love of all is happening to me, I found the greatest love of all inside of me. The greatest love of all is easy to achieve. Learning to love yourself, it is the greatest love of all. So I used to love the lyrics of that song, and I obviously do since still do since it's coming to my mind. But she does mention easy to achieve. But is it easy to achieve? Now, De La Rosa, our author, talks about how so many of us are walking around with false beliefs in our heads, including false beliefs about ourselves. False beliefs that far too often just leave us feeling unworthy or even abandoned. Maybe even believing that we don't deserve good things. Or even walking around wondering when the next thing that is going to happen that's just going to pull the rug completely out from underneath us. And how many of you have, or at least sometime or the other, entertained those very thoughts or very similar thoughts? I know that I have, and I also know that when I have, it hasn't been a very fun place to be. Or even worse, how many of us only seem to love ourselves when we're seemingly perfect? Then the moment we make a mistake, we basically just kind of punish ourselves or tell ourselves that we're no good or that we're not worthy of good things in life. Well, that's conditional self-love, and that's not a good place. It's not a fun place to be. So how is it that we can learn to practice the art of true self-love? Now, one of the things De La Rosa mentions in the book, he says, what the self-love movement is missing is techniques. Techniques regarding how we can get to feelings of self-love, positive regard, and harmonious alliance within ourselves without attacking, repressing, or ignoring our difficult parts. So it seems to me like he's suggesting that true love doesn't ignore these types of things. It doesn't ignore what he calls our difficult parts. It instead embraces those things. So think about being in a relationship with someone. We likely know that our spouse, our partner, and our friends, they're not always perfect, right? We know that they have their difficult parts, as our author states, and we've all got them as well. We've got our difficult parts as well. But with those that we love, do we choose not to love them because of those difficult parts? If not, there probably wouldn't be very many relationships happening in our lives. But we generally don't choose to throw them out just because of their difficult parts, unless, of course, there's abuse involved. But last week we discussed 4 skills that were mentioned in our reading. These skills are to pause, to unblend, to become curious, and to shift the conversation, the inner dialogue. And what if we were to apply these skills here to self-love? Now, he addresses curiosity when it comes to self-love. So far too often, withholding self-love, either consciously or not, is to protect ourselves in some way, right? When you really think about it, we're protecting ourselves in some way. For instance, I won't let my hopes get too far up, just in case it doesn't work out. In that instance, we're protecting ourselves from possible disappointment. Maybe we've had a lot of disappointment in our lives, and we want to protect ourselves from further instances. Maybe one of our parents was an addict or withheld love. Maybe there was abuse. We just want to protect ourselves from further instances. What if we were to use curiosity to really start to dig deeper, to delve into that part of us that withholds in order to protect? To use that curiosity to really go in and to ask the inner part of ourselves questions. You maybe ask, how long is it that you've been protecting me this way? Do you like being this way, or do you find it exhausting? When we do those things, when we begin to get curious and ask ourselves questions, we open the door for us to realize that another world or another way of thinking and living and being is indeed possible. Now, chapter 5 starts to shift gears a little bit. He starts the chapter with a quote by a writer and civil rights activist, and I didn't write the name down. I'll have to look at it. Look at the beginning of chapter 5 and you'll see. But this person says, pain is important. How we evade it, how we succumb to it, and how we deal with it, how we transcend it. And then our author talks about the pains felt in life and how we react to the pains we feel, especially when we start to feel like we're backed into a corner. And we all feel this way sometimes, don't we? We feel that maybe the pain is overwhelming, or feel like that we just have absolutely nothing left to give. And when we do, we tend to go into this feral state that a wild animal can find itself in when it's backed into a corner. This place where we feel the adrenaline start to rise and we move into this fight or flight mode. All we can think about is getting out of that corner. And we get to the point where we'll do just about anything, not to only get out of it, but to get out of it completely unscathed. Maybe we even start to hear this inner voice begin to scream, I can't even. I don't have what it takes. And then we start to find ourselves thinking about how impossible it feels, about how we have absolutely no fight that's left within us, nothing else to give, almost like our energy is just completely zapped, like it's just completely gone. But then we start to hear a voice, another voice. And this one might not quite be so loud. So it's important to practice one of those skills that he mentions, the skill of pause. We take a moment in our panic and we pause. And when we pause, we allow ourselves to catch our breath for just a moment. We know that whatever pain we are facing feels insurmountable at the time, doesn't it? And just when it starts to feel overwhelming, just when that hill starts to feel impossible to climb, just when we can think of nothing more than literally running and screaming out of that corner that we feel ourselves trapped in, we pause. We start to unblend. We may initially even just take one step back. We test the waters a little bit. We think to ourselves, that feels okay. I think I'm going to be okay. So then we take another, and then we take another, further practicing the skill of unblending. We start to feel some resistance or some resilience start to build when we do that. That quiet voice that tells us that we can starts to come through louder and starts becoming easier and easier to hear, easier to decipher. We suddenly start to take notice of new doorways that begin to open. new opportunities that start to come our way. We may even start to become curious at this point and ask ourselves questions. Maybe even the question of, what's the spiritual opportunity here for me? What is the meaning of this experience? We start to think about what it is that we would tell a person in the same situation. We'd likely speak to them with kindness and compassion, right? So we remember to do this for ourselves as well. Going back to that self-love, that true, authentic self-love. And then it is then in that moment where we begin to transcend that pain, where we begin to learn how to successfully navigate through it, where we begin to let go of that notion that we have nothing left to give. And instead we start to realize that we have everything to give. We always have and we always will. So I ask you today, do you love yourself? I mean, do you really and truly love yourself? And if not, don't you think it's time? There's no time like right now to chart a new course. We can do this at any second of any day. We can learn that, of course, really learning to love yourself is truly, like Whitney Houston said, one of the greatest gifts of all. And what about resilience? You know, it's something you're searching for and something to gain, right? Or it's hopefully something that you've been searching for and something to gain. But you know what? It's not something that's there to be found because it's been inside all along. It's something that you already are. You may have to dig a bit deep sometimes to reconnect to it, but that doesn't mean that it's gone anywhere. It's still there and it's waiting to meet you in the middle. The question then becomes, are you willing? Namaste. And remember, once again, our annual meeting starts at 11:30. We'll probably start letting people in about 5 minutes till. So again, if you're in that virtual waiting room, just kind of hang out for a little while, maybe grab some lunch, and just kind of relax because we will let you in. Again, check the calendar. Voting members come in through the Zoom link. Non-members, please join us through the live stream. Martin will be streaming it. Just like right here where we're streaming right now, that is where it will stream. So please join us there. And let's move on to our next special music.